All right, let's dive into one of the most tragic and complicated periods in American history, the road to the Civil War. This wasn't something that happened overnight. It was a decades-long story of escalating crises that finally, and tragically, tore the entire nation in two.
I mean, it's a huge question, isn't it? How does a country get to the point of breaking? Well, the answer isn't simple. It's not one single event. It's more like a slow-motion catastrophe, a series of political failures and one fundamental, non-negotiable disagreement that just couldn't be solved.
So, in the 1840s, this one idea just takes over America: manifest destiny. It was this belief that the United States was, destined to stretch from coast to coast. A powerful, popular dream. But that dream forced an issue the country had been desperately trying to ignore. Because with every new square mile of land, one single explosive question had to be answered.
To really get what's going on, we have to look at the crack in the foundation. Long before anyone was talking about California or Texas, the United States was already, as Lincoln would later say, a house divided against itself.
You'd hear this term used back then, the peculiar institution. It's a euphemism, really, for the entire system of slavery. And we have to remember, this wasn't just an economic system for the South. It was their entire social and political order, something they defended with everything they had, while more and more people in the North were coming to see it as a profound moral evil.
Now this is a really, really important distinction to make. Not everybody in the North who was against slavery was an abolitionist. The abolitionists, they wanted to end slavery, period, everywhere, immediately. But a much bigger and politically more powerful group were the Free Soilers. Their goal was different: just stop it from spreading into the new Western territories. That difference is absolutely crucial for understanding the politics of what's coming next.
Okay, so that brings us right back to the West. That dream of manifest destiny quickly turned into the reality of conquest, and it was like pouring gasoline on that simmering fire between the North and South.
And wow, things moved fast. Just look at this timeline. The U.S. annexes Texas, which was already a slaveholding republic, and that leads directly to war with Mexico. The U.S. wins, and the peace treaty hands over this enormous chunk of land, what's now California, Nevada, Utah, and a bunch of other states.
And boom, there it is, the one question you just can't avoid anymore. All this new land, what's its future going to be? Slave or free? This is where the free soil movement and the pro-slavery forces are set on a direct collision course.
What's crazy is that even during the war, they knew this was going to be a problem. A congressman named David Wilmot tried to get ahead of it. His proposal, the Wilmot Proviso, would have banned slavery in any land won from Mexico. It didn't pass, but the vote itself was a political earthquake. For the first time, Congress voted almost purely along sectional lines, North versus South, not by political party. The whole system was starting to break.
So the country is basically spiraling, right? And the politicians in Washington are just scrambling, making these desperate attempts to find some kind of compromise, any compromise to hold the Union together.
And the biggest attempt was the Compromise of 1850. Just look at this thing. It was this insane balancing act. The North gets California admitted as a free state. Big win for them. The South gets a much, much tougher fugitive slave law and the possibility of slavery in the other new territories. It was designed to give just enough to each side to calm things down.
But out of all of that, one piece was an absolute bombshell, that new fugitive slave law. And here's why it was such a big deal. It made northern states and their citizens legally responsible for helping to catch and return escaped slaves. Suddenly, the reality of slavery wasn't just a southern problem. It was on the streets of Boston and Philadelphia. It infuriated people in the North.
Yeah, so that peace from the 1850 Compromise, it didn't last long, not at all. Because now, the crisis moves into a terrifying new phase. We're moving from just political fights to actual bloodshed.
All right, so politicians come up with this idea that sounds pretty democratic on the surface. Popular sovereignty. Forget Congress drawing lines on a map. Let the people who actually move to a territory vote and decide for themselves. Simple, right? What could possibly go wrong?
The main guy pushing this is Senator Stephen Douglas from Illinois. He's got this big plan for a transcontinental railroad starting from Chicago, and he figures popular sovereignty is the political grease he needs to get Southern politicians to vote for his plan. It was a massive miscalculation. But here's the catch, and it is a huge one. For over 30 years, the Missouri Compromise had been the law of the land. It drew a line across the country, and slavery was banned north of it. The Kansas-Nebraska Act completely wiped that line off the map, opening territory that had been guaranteed free to the possibility of slavery. To the North, this felt like an absolute betrayal.
So what do you think happens next? If the future of Kansas is all going to be decided by a local election, well, both sides are going to do whatever it takes to win that election. People flooded into the Kansas territory, not just to start farms, but to fight for their cause, first at the ballot box and then with guns. And the result was a name that says it all: Bleeding Kansas. It wasn't a debate anymore. It was a vicious, small-scale civil war on the prairie. Raids, massacres, towns being sacked. Popular sovereignty, the idea that was supposed to bring peace, had brought war. It was a terrifying preview of what was coming for the rest of the country. And just when you think things can't get any worse, while Kansas is bleeding, the Supreme Court drops a legal bomb on the entire country. This is the Dred Scott Decision. An enslaved man, Dred Scott, had sued for his freedom because he had lived with his owner in free territories. The court's ruling was just staggering, and it came in 3 devastating parts. So let's just stop and be perfectly clear about what this meant. The highest court in the land had just declared that Congress had no power to stop slavery from spreading anywhere. The central idea of the Free Soil movement and the brand new Republican Party was now, according to the Supreme Court, unconstitutional. For anti-slavery Americans, the system had completely and utterly failed them. So, after Bleeding Kansas, after the Dred Scott Decision, there's no middle ground left. The political center just collapses. You're either on one side or the other. The nation is now basically 2 hostile camps, and the final steps toward disunion are becoming terrifyingly clear. Remember that Kansas-Nebraska Act? It did more than just cause violence. It literally created a whole new political party. The Republican Party was born in 1854 for one reason and one reason only: to stop the expansion of slavery. It had basically zero support in the South, which made it America's first truly major sectional party.
And the person who becomes the voice of this new party is a lawyer from Illinois named Abraham Lincoln. He's running for the Senate in 1858 against Stephen Douglas, the same guy who wrote the Kansas-Nebraska Act. And in their famous series of debates, even though Lincoln loses the election, his powerful, eloquent arguments against slavery's expansion make him a national figure. He becomes the face of the Republican cause.
Which brings us right to the edge of the precipice. By 1860, every attempt at compromise had failed. Violence had already broken out. The Supreme Court had sided completely with the South. The political parties were broken and divided by region. All the normal ways of solving problems in a democracy were gone. So you have to ask yourself, was there any peaceful way out of this?